going to happen? That's the big question. I sat down just a minute ago with one of the folks over at AFP because they've been doing all kinds of things at the ground level to get the word out and to make sure that Republicans are registered to vote. I wanted to get his take on where we are right now. Listen. Well, that didn't go as planned. Here we go. We'll try again. Listen. Joining me right now with a more in-depth look at the races we should really be watching and where he thinks his team has had a big impact. We have Brent Gardner. He's from AFP, Americans for Prosperity. Great to see you. And wow, I mean, there's a lot going on. We're in the 11th hour, if you would. And I know you've been pounding the pavement and you got a great grassroots organization there at AFP. Where do you think you guys are having the most impact? Which states we should start with?
Yeah, no, I thanks for having me on, first of all. But look, I think across the 7 races that we're engaged in, there's no doubt that I can now say more than 15 million voters that we have had outreach with, we're having a big impact. Certainly in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Ohio, Michigan, Montana, Nevada, I mean, across the country, we're having an impact. These folks and these conversations that we're having across the country have yielded, I think, really significant gains for the candidates in the 7 Senate races we're engaged in, the 44 House races that we're engaged in, and the more than 640 races that we're engaged in nationwide.
It's incredible. One of the historic problems with the Republican Party is that they really haven't been so active on the early voting front. And I will compliment Democrats and say, wow, they had a heck of a ground game, right? And they always had a heck of a ground game, and they were very organized and very systematic about it. A lot of Republicans look at that and they're like, oh, it's some form of cheating, this, that, and the other. I'm like, hang on, you know what? Because 2 can play that game, and we can have a good ground game too. And that's what you guys have been focused on. Will that make the difference?
I think it'll be part of making the difference. I mean, ultimately, people should choose the method that gives them the best opportunity to ensure that they actually vote, which is why our conversations with the doors, the driveways, and on phone calls isn't about, are you going to vote? Because saying you're going to vote is different than having a plan to vote. And that's why we go that extra step and make sure that they do. And whether
when you say that, what do you mean? Just, do you have a ride? What are you doing that day? Are you getting off work early?
That's right. So that's true if you're voting in person, but also making sure they're aware of those opportunities you talked about, which is to be able to go in and vote early in person, to request an absentee ballot if you need one. Those opportunities across the board, the vote counts the same. So it's about finding a way to match up the opportunity that's best for the person just to ensure that their vote's counted.
It's amazing. It seems so easy, right? And I live in a small New England town. But when I first moved here, I had to ask, where do you go to vote? Turns out it's at the local school, and that's why school is closed on election day. But, you got to find these things out, and you can go on the internet, you can ask friends. But when you talk about the plan to vote, I think it's important to think about all those people that maybe don't take the time to go on the internet or don't take the time to ask their friends and maybe don't even know those basics.
Yeah, that's right. And I think ultimately you've got folks who vote in every election that have got a sense of that. But there's a number of folks who maybe don't vote in every election. And so the opportunity to reach out to the base, to swing voters, to anyone who you think is going to go out there and do the right thing and give them the information that they need on how to vote. Make sure they have a plan on how to vote. Make sure they're connected to folks if they need a ride to vote. Okay. Regardless, just make sure they've worked through that plan because this race is
vote. It's super important.
Yeah.
With that in mind, and again, knowing what you guys have done on the ground, you mentioned Nevada. Talk to me about, for example, Pennsylvania, because that's a biggie. If the Republicans take Pennsylvania, I think the Republicans are in really, really good shape. But what are the most important races to you? I know from a state side, also from a Senate side.
Yeah, Trish. So just the other day, we crossed 1 million doors in Pennsylvania. The opportunity to have that kind of mobilization on the ground is making a difference for sure. And that's not the only place. I mean, look, across the country, whether it's the race in Montana, where we've done more than 650,000 doors, it's going to make a difference in these critical states that add up to the types of majorities that we're going to need in the chambers and the type of activations that we're going to need to see to have Republicans who can go out there, pursue good policy, and push back against the worst ideas here in Washington.
I know there's lots of bad ideas, lots and lots and lots of bad ideas. And we'll be talking to you on the other side of the election about that. But, I guess just in the here and now, it's like, what happens, what happens, what happens? It's hard to make predictions. Do you have any sort of gut instinct on what we're going to see? I keep going to Polymarket, and there's another couple prediction markets out there as well. What we're seeing, and given my stock market investing background, I tend to default to some of this stuff, not just prediction markets, but even the internals of the market overall. And it looks as though the market is gearing up for something. The market is gearing up for a Donald Trump win. The market is gearing up, I think, for some upside within the House and Senate as well. Your take?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of folks today that have optimism, but I'd caution against optimism. Optimism is a wonderful thing to feel in your heart, but at the end of the day, this race is going to be extremely close across the board. For all of these races, they're margin races. And if you see numbers today and anchor to those, you're probably not going to be looking at the right thing, because what matters is campaigns and folks who run through the tape on election day. It's going to be about who actually makes it to the polls. And so, well, I think the thing to look at to give optimism is the trend lines of where we've seen so many of these folks go in raising their name ID, understanding where they are in those critical issues like inflation, like the crisis at the border. I think campaigns and individuals who run right through that tape on election day, that's going to be the folks who win. And I think there are some good signs there. But it's important for them to not take their foot off the gas all the way through.
No, I say that, like, you don't want to get too far out over your skis. You don't want to be too optimistic about this. And look, anything can happen, and we need to be prepared for that. But to your point, the ground game matters, and a lot of that work was done ahead of time. I'm looking at, for example, what we saw in Pennsylvania. I was just talking to my friend Dave Buss. He was out on the bus the other day with the whole Trump team there, and he's like, this is incredible. Like, we've whittled down, we've knocked it more than in half, right? The advantage that the Democrats used to have. You guys, by knocking on 1 million doors in one place and 650,000, I didn't even know they had 650,000 in Montana. Did you say Montana?
I did. We've knocked through the population.
That's a lot of doors to find in Montana. Right. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that I think could make all the difference. You're getting people registered. You needed to get people registered. And so now in this final moment, it's making sure that there's some follow through and that they get out there.
Yeah, Trish, we're a platform that gives folks an opportunity who want to get engaged. You don't hit those numbers if there's not energy within the groups of folks that want to get active on solving the problems in our country. So it's great to hit those kind of numbers, but it's also a sign of people who've been really badly impacted by the policies of the Biden-Harris administration, who want to go out there and see this election as an inflection point to take this country in a better direction.
Wow. I think we're going to see a lot of that. A lot of it. So thanks for everything you guys are doing over at AFP. I just want to encourage the viewers, if they want to get involved, you've got a great grassroots effort there all over the country, and people can be part of this today. Go to americansforprosperity.org. Brent, thank you for your time. We're going to have you on to talk about this on the other side, because there's going to be, I think, a lot of policy issues that are coming up and that people are passionate about and care about. You mentioned inflation. You mentioned the border. I know we've spoken before about healthcare with the folks over at AFP. There's a lot of stuff out there that needs to be, quote unquote, reformed, shall we say, reformed and fixed and made better. So we look forward to talking to you about those ideas. In the meantime, we'll see what happens on Tuesday.
Sounds great. We'll see you on the other side.
Thanks so much, Brent Gardner. My thanks to Brent. I mean, it's really going to be very, very interesting. Just a reminder to